Velkommen til en ny episode med podcasten Manneprat. And warmly welcome to you, Kipp. Kipp Sorensen.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Happy to be here, man.
Cool. I was just thinking, do you have family from Europe or Scandinavia?
Yeah, so Danish, the small town that my great-grandfather helped settle used to be called Little Denmark. And so my ancestors were Mormon pioneers that came from Denmark and from England, came across to America in hand carts and settled a small little town in Utah, and they called that little town Little Denmark. So yeah, my ancestors are certainly there. And the name of that town is actually called, they later called it Elsinore. And kind of interesting to me anyway, is a couple years ago, took the family out to Denmark and found the town called Elsinore. That's that they actually named that town after. So pretty neat stuff, but yes.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, we connected some time ago, and you're involved in the organization Order of Man. We have talked a little bit back and forward. So I guess there's a lot of cool things we can talk about. I also seen that you're quite interested in jiu-jitsu.
Yep.
And you're a father of, is it 3 or 4?
I'm a father of 6.
6, okay, wow. Yeah.
6 kids, yep.
Yeah, so what got you involved in working with men, those kind of things?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I was following a podcast, Order of Man, years and years ago. I think I've always been on this path of, I have definitely a growth mindset, and I've always been hungry to improve me personally, whether it's mentally or physically or just knowledge, and so that's always been an interest of mine. So podcasts are a natural attraction of mine, reading books and those kind of things. And I joined the Iron Council, which is a men's group, like, I think we were talking about it maybe about 5 years ago. And as a member in that group, I really started realizing, one, that there's impact that we can all leave in each other's lives, that by you and I just connecting and getting to know each other, there's value in that. There's value in banding with like-minded individuals. And through that process, I think I kind of found my voice too, in the sense of I have ideas and things to offer. And so when those opportunities presented themselves for me to give into other individuals, I've been eager to say yes to that, because I think that's what we all need. And so, and to be frank, I have to check my ego every so often and make sure that I'm not thinking I'm better than anybody, and really my willingness to share ideas and concepts have to be rooted in the true intent of my heart, and that is to help.
Like when you joined the men's group, what would you say is like your biggest takeaways, or what you learned from connecting with other men? Why is it so important for men? Or could be a good thing to connect with other men?
Yeah, man, I think there's so much to it, to be honest with you. I think, unfortunately, we've done a poor ass job being good men. and our fathers, generally speaking, a lot of our fathers were not great dads and didn't really teach us what they should have been teaching us. And we're not doing much better than them. And so I think there's a crisis. Dr. Warren Farrell wrote a book called The Boy Crisis, one of my favorite books of all time. And that book helps illustrate that there's a dilemma. And and it's me, right? So I can relate, right? So if you and I are talking about the struggles of marriage, I can relate to that, right? I can relate to being a young boy and what that relationship with a father looks like. And so I don't know if it's like, oh, men need help, so I dived in. It's really just, it's my tribe. It's the group that I can relate to. And I might have more to share into that category than other categories.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And like regards to the practice of jiu-jitsu, what brought you into that? I mean, I've seen you. It looks like you've practiced for quite some time. So, I mean, there must have been something that pulled you in down that
totally.
road.
Yeah. 15 years ago, roughly, I started training. So I don't know if you know the history of jiu-jitsu,
No,
but
please tell.
so the history of jiu-jitsu is a little bit of the history of the UFC, and you've heard of the UFC before. So back in the 90s, a family by the name of the Gracies, and I won't get into the whole history of jiu-jitsu, but ultimately they started the UFC #1. It was done in, and this jiu-jitsu family formulated and created UFC. And the first UFC was pay-per-view only, VHS tape. It was performed on an Indian reservation in Colorado. So it wasn't illegal, right, in state or federal land. And in that first UFC, Royce Gracie, probably, I don't know, 165, 170 pounds, super lightweight guy, back in those original versions, no weight class and no rules, by the way, and no gloves, or you could wear a glove. Like there's one guy that would wear like a boxing glove. Everyone else, bare knuckled fist. You could pull hair. You couldn't bite and you couldn't eye gouge. That's it. But you could groin shot all you want. I mean, there's all kind. It was just, and there's no weight classes, and it was a tournament bracket. So if you won the first round, you would fight again that night. You would have multiple fights in a given night. So if you go break a hand in round 1, you're done, right? And so anyhow, a buddy of mine, his older brother, grabbed one of those VHS tapes of the first UFC, and he was like, "You guys got to watch this." And I remember watching that in high school. And I remember actually feeling a little sick in my gut, right? I was like, whoa, man, this is brutal, right? I mean, these guys are just going after each other. And there's a sense of brutality that comes with bare knuckled fighting that's a little bit different when there's no gloves, a little bit different than when there are gloves, I should say. So that was my first introduction. And this small jiu-jitsu guy just wiped the floor with everybody, right? And so I was like, superpower, right? Like I want to know what that guy knows. And I did a little bit of jiu-jitsu in high school with my buddy, but it wasn't fun, right? And the guys were nerds and they're weird guys, and it wasn't my kind of crowd. And I wanted to punch people. I didn't want to like just grapple. And so it didn't really connect with me until roughly about 15 years ago. And it really changed actually for me. Probably I was on and off training, and I moved out to New York. I went to a school by a guy by the name of this guy, Vitor Shaolin. And he said something that I thought would be valuable maybe for your listeners is I went in there and I said, "Hey, Shaolin," I go, "could I get a punch pass?" And he's like, "What do you mean?" And I'm like, "Can I buy 10 classes and then just come whenever I can make it a priority?" And he goes, "You misunderstand." He's like, "Our students are committed to jiu-jitsu or they're not. Right? You're training all the time. This is what you're doing, or this is not for you." And it was black and white for him. Obviously not, and maybe an ideal business decision, because like there's a lot of people that don't want to train like that, maybe. But it resonated with me. I was like, yeah, you know what? You're right. I'm riding the fence, right? I'm riding this fence of jiu-jitsu. Are you in or you're out? And so that resonated. I signed up for an unlimited class. I lived in Manhattan. It was wicked expensive. And so to justify the cost, I was like, I better train every day. And that's when I really started training on a regular basis. But at the root of why do jiu-jitsu, at first, it may have been to look cool, right? I do jiu-jitsu. I get to be able to say that. The other part might be that, you know, I have a skill set where I can be violent and hurt someone else. But then once I started training, it was no longer about those things. And it didn't take long for me to realize that the benefits of jiu-jitsu was the mental benefit of putting myself in difficult, hard, challenging situations, and maintain my cool. And that's kind of like one of the first lessons of jiu-jitsu. A lot of people don't realize they've never had hands put on them where you can't move. Like where you're pinned, you can't move, and someone's suffocating you with their weight, or they're trying to choke you. That is a very panicking feeling. And that's one of the first lessons you learn, is like to be calm in the storm, that you're okay, that it's going to be okay, you know, and to keep your head straight. And I can go on for hours about all the other benefits of jiu-jitsu, but in all honesty, why did I start? Probably because I thought it would look good. Probably more than anything else. And it was an area where I got in a lot of fights as a kid. And I got my ass kicked most of the time as a kid. And so I think fighting was in that category of something that I avoided, that I shouldn't be avoiding, if that makes sense. And so I kind of went after it from that perspective, but a whole different reason why I kept training over the years, for sure.
Yeah, but yeah, you said a lot of interesting things, and I was just really curious, because it's when you go in and are committed to something like that, it's a practice. It's something you do consistently, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So also, like, if you have a kind of a meditation practice, you can, I guess you can have a lot of different kind of practices.
Totally.
And I heard, like, okay, if you do like, either you do it consistent or either you don't do it consistent. Like, how you do one thing is how you do everything.
Yeah. Or maybe even said another way, there's a big difference to someone that's all in versus someone that's not. Period. Right? Like, and what is all in? What does it look like to be all in with my 4-year-old when we play? What does it look like to be all in with my employer? That when I'm here, I'm all in. I'm fully committed to what we're doing. I'm fully engaged. I'm all in on my marriage. Not a, hey, I'll stay in this marriage until maybe it's going okay, and I'll, you know, look for evidence, and I'm wishy-washy. Are you in or you're out? You know what I mean? And there's a big difference between people that are fully present and all in around what they're about in life. And it's actually quite refreshing. And the performance that we get when we're all in is amazing, you know. And I think that's, you know, goes back to what you're saying, whether it's meditation, jiu-jitsu, work, being a parent, man, I don't know if there's any other way to be, or that we should be, really, other than all in. Otherwise, why are we doing it?
Interesting perspective. So maybe you can tell a little bit about the organization that you are in, with Order of Man, and what is happening there. Yeah, I mean, my podcast also, I have like 60% male listeners, men, and 40% women. So but it's yeah, I run a few groups in Norway, and then working on that project. So would be super cool to just hear what's going on over there.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, Order of Man, I mean, really, what if I had to just put my, you know, off the hip definition of it, is it just a resource for men, right? Having the conversations that that men should be having, and we're trying to be a resource where men can go to rise up, right? And be better, whether it's fathers or husbands or, employers or workers or in our communities or general, right? And that's our focal, and that's the impact that we're trying to create. And within the Order of Man, I mentioned this earlier, we have an exclusive brotherhood, which we call the Iron Council. And that is a membership group where we expect men to come to the table and be all in about being called up and showing up more powerfully in life. And we do that by bringing guys in. We have kind of what we use as goal setting on a regular basis. We have cadences of accountability within our teams. They have weekly calls and challenges that they focus on. And that membership is our way of calling men up and restoring the importance of what it means to be a man. And I like to think that we're a little unreasonable there. And I like that term, if you don't mind me ragging on that a little bit. Like, I think we live in a world of mediocrity. We perpetuate and promote victimhood because it makes them feel good, because they don't have to take ownership of their lives. If I can blame my marriage failure on my wife and on other people, then I don't have to deal with me. If my job sucks, but it's because of my boss, I don't have to deal with my shortcomings. And it's a very natural human thing to do, to be a victim. And I think we perpetuate it by rescuing people and by feeling sorry for them and giving passes for mediocrity so we can feel the same way about ourselves. And in the Iron Council, that's a no-go. We call that out, and we're not going to accept mediocrity. And people need to take ownership and responsibility for their lives. And really, we're not there forcing anybody to do anything. We're there to create the framework for men to be self-directed in their growth and their progression and what they're about in life. And we have that support model in place to help them accomplish that if they choose to take that on.
Why at what point in life does men normally contact you or contact the organization about this? Like, is it when everything is going good, or is it when everything is
it's usually when
crazy?
When shit hits the fan, right? So and it's not surprising, right? Like most growth is where. And this is a silly part about human nature, by the way, right? Is we spend most of our time doing what? Trying to make our lives comfortable, right? Try to have a comfortable living and not stress or what all these things. But reality is, where's the growth? It's in the stress. It's in the uncomfortable. And sometimes life forces that on us. And sometimes we can voluntarily take that on, right? And I think for unfortunately for a lot of men, I would say that they're probably more drawn towards the Iron Council based upon hardship in their lives. And they're coming to a pivotal point where they're like, hey, I'm not living a life of fulfillment and purpose. Something's missing, something's got to give, or my marriage is falling apart. And enough is enough. And I'm willing to do something about it. So I don't know what the percentage is though, but I would probably argue it's the majority for sure.
Yeah.
They've
come to a kind of a turning point.
Yeah. And they're seeking transformation, right?
And like we talked about different things. We talked about victimhood. We talked about integrity. Like the power of practice, the power of consistency, a lot of stuff. I also seen you share a lot about your family, your kids. Maybe how is it for you to be a father, and what do you have anything you want to share with us?
Yeah,
around fatherhood.
Yeah, first off, it's my greatest calling. I don't think there's anything more important that I do in my life as fatherhood. And I am constantly reminded how blessed I am to have such great kids. I love my children, and gosh, I'm constantly just blessed when I think about that I get a chance to be their dad, because they're pretty amazing. Fatherhood's really interesting. I do a lot of leadership development as part of my job, and every single leadership principle is transcendent to parenting and leadership at work. There is no difference between the two. And in fact, I would argue that parenting is like the black belt version of leadership, and at work it's like, lower level. And those principles are transcendent, of course. And so I use my experiences as a dad on a regular basis as examples of leadership principles, and use them as really tough examples of how do we deal with these tough circumstances. Because if I can deal with that at home with a teenage boy, that's way easier than dealing with another adult in the office, right? And so, yes, but I think there's a level, and this is one of those areas where, like, I'm tempted to be like, well, I don't want to offend anybody. Here's the deal. And not everyone's going to have the chance to be a parent. And some people may not choose to be a parent. We all have agency and freedom in our choices. But I think the majority of men, there's an echelon of growth that's available to us only through parenting. I really do believe that. Like, and it's always the story, you hear people are like, oh, we don't have kids, but I have my dog. It's very similar to us, right? And you're like, actually, it's not similar at all, but it's in the realm of what you don't understand. So yeah, sure, it's the same for you. And then you become a parent and you're like, holy crap, right? Like, for the first time in your life, you now understand what unconditional love is. Right? That would have never been present to you until you have a children and you feel what unconditional love is. You now know exactly what it feels like to be able to love someone, and regardless of what they do to you, you would always love them. That's only made available, in my opinion, through being a parent. And so there is growth in parenting that I don't think exists anywhere else. And so it's been an honor to have that ride. And as I continue as well to try to become a better parent on a regular basis. And we have two batches of kids. We have 3 older kids that are kind of similar in age, and we have 3 younger kids with a big gap between. We call them batch 1 and batch 2. And there's a big difference between how we raised batch 1 versus batch 2. And hopefully we're getting some good reps in. So this last batch, we don't ruin them too much, So, but it's been a great experience learning.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I mean, you said between batch 1 and batch 2, what have been the biggest learning, or what did you decide to do different?
Yeah. I would say the biggest is the shift of priority and focus. My priority with the older kids was teach them discipline, teach them it's important to have a clean room. They need to be hard workers, and them knowing that they're loved was secondary to those other things. And I'm not willing to compromise my children knowing that they're loved and appreciated for the sake of those other principles. So, kind of a shift of priority. I think maybe one of the biggest things that was a breakthrough for me with the older kids. And once again, right, we can see how this translates to life, is that when you have a difficult relationship with someone, whether it's your kid or a coworker or someone else, we have a tendency to look at them as the problem. And we go, Fredrik, because you're showing up or you're doing these things, that's a problem for me. And so let me coach you and change you. and get you to act different, right? So think of it as a teenage kid as a perfect example. In fact, I should probably just use that example always is, hey, teenage kid, you're being a moron. You're making bad decisions. You're doing what you shouldn't be doing. Let me tell you what you need to fix. And after you fix these things and you're following our rules or whatever, then we can have a better relationship, right? And then our relationship will be better, right? Then I'll invest in you once you get on the path of doing the right things, and then we'll have a better relationship. Then everything will be okay. It's a complete opposite. It's a complete opposite, right? If you're coming to me and you're saying, hey, Kipp, you need to fix these things for us to have a better relationship, what does that look like? You don't care about me. You're just trying to change me. I'm not good the way I am, all these other things. And that was one of the major breakthroughs with our older kid. One of them in particular, when he's kind of being a moron and making bad decisions, was like, man, he's fine. He's actually okay. Now, is he making bad decisions? Sure. But you know what? I shouldn't be withholding love and affection from him because he's not doing what I think he should be doing. And that, most importantly, I'm in zero position of influence with you if you don't know that I care. I think it's Dale Carnegie I will slaughter the quote, but says something to the extent of, people don't care about what you have to say until they know how much you care.
Yeah.
And that's true, because now the intent is pure. If you know that I care for you as an individual, as your boss, now when I give you coaching, are you like, oh man, he's just trying to change me? No, you know that I care. I'm on the train. We know that their intent is for the betterment of us. And now our influence is more powerful. And so that's probably the biggest breakthrough is I was withholding affection and caring for my children based upon whether they were doing what I felt like they should be doing or not, which is just horrible in hindsight. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, thank you for even sharing and just talking openly about that. I mean, yeah.
I might be a little bit too much of an open book. So
yeah. Thank you. I mean, I just noticed for myself, there is a difference when I'm with my son, from what we talked about recently. Like when I'm fully present, I'm all in. Between when I'm preoccupied with work and those kind of things, it's like that's two different things.
Oh, totally. So, and they know. I remember this was years ago when my two oldest boys were fairly young. They were, I don't know, 4 and 2 maybe. And at 4 and 2, they just want to play. And I was a single father, and like daycare does not work for full-time working people, right? So like you drop them off at 9, you have to pick them up by 3. Like who works 9 to 3, right? Like doesn't work. And so for my first summer with them full time, I had to work at home in the morning, then go drop them off, go to the office, to come home and then work from home. Does it make sense? To get my hours in, to work a full day. And I would do that right after I picked them up. And the anxiety, the frustration, the anger that I had, because why? Because I was trying to do this. I was trying to work. Hey, kids, be quiet. Like they're just trying to play, and I'm getting angry at them. And I'm like, this is not going to work. I am like showing up like a complete jerk. My kids are like, this guy sucks. And I just remember getting super pissed one time, and I thought, yeah, this isn't going to work. I got to just be a kid. And that's kind of how I felt. Is like, I just need to be a kid. And so whenever I picked them up, I was in kid mode. Legos, Nerf guns, being goofy, rolling on the floor. I was just a kid. And I let go of work, and I just said F it to everything. And I was just playful. And then I'd put it in a bed, and then I'd take on the stresses of all the stuff I needed to get done. But you can't do both, right? And it's so true, man. Whether it's parenting or even work, there's a big difference between a distinction that I like to make when we talk about impact on employees, right, in the workforce, is we want to drive for employees to be fully committed and engaged, always. Like that is your goal, fully committed and engaged. And if an employee is compliant, like I'm just working 9 to 5, I'm not feeling the love, and they're doing good work, guess what? It's not enough. I want fully committed and engaged. When we hire people, that's what I say. I'm the last executive interview and I go, here's the expectation. If you come on board and you work here, my expectation is you're all in. You're fully committed and engaged around what we're doing, and you love your job and you show up with energy and you want us to win. Now, if you don't look for that kind of job or you don't want that kind of job, that's great, but that's not here. That's somewhere else. And when things come up and an employee gets disenfranchised or whatever, it's my job as a leader to go, hey, what's going on? Why aren't you fully engaged? Like and I want to be really clear. Fully engaged isn't they're doing subpar work. Fully committed and engaged is how they feel. Dude, you love your job? Are you all in? Are you loving what we're doing? No, I'm not. Okay, why? What's going on? How can I eliminate the blockers that are preventing you from being fully committed and engaged? And then we talk through it and then we address it. And the reason why is, one, that kind of employee, just like you as a dad, shows up way more powerfully. But there's also fulfillment in that way of doing things. You feel good as a dad when you're fully all in as a dad. You feel good as an employee when you leave at the end of the day and you brought your best to the table. That is where fulfillment comes from, is when we're in integrity with ourselves and what we're committed to doing. And so we want to constantly seek for that at all times, in my opinion.
Would you like to share a little bit more about your own experience regards to integrity?
Yeah, geez. That I'm always in and out of integrity all the time. That's my experience with it. I think it's something that we have to fight for. I think it's just like everything else. I mean, I can be in integrity with you right now, walk outside this conference room door and be out of integrity instantly, because I go against what I know I should or should not do. I like to put integrity on its head, right? Because we talk about this like, oh, integrity is what you do when no one's watching. I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. That's that's softball version of integrity, right? High levels of integrity or real integrity, I think it includes that. It is what you do when no one's looking. I think it's you doing things the way they were meant to be done. I think when you say, hey, I'm going to clean the kitchen today, you know what that looks like for you as an individual. And when you cut corners, you're out of integrity. I think when you go to the gym and you know you have 12 reps at, 150 pounds, and come rep 10, your little mind's going, no, 10's enough, 10's enough. And you give up, you're out of integrity, right? I think we're fighting the battle inside around integrity in almost every single thing that we do. Now, here's an important distinction that I like to make when we talk about integrity. It's a form of self-betrayal. So when you go against what you know you should or should not do, you are performing self-betrayal, which erodes your confidence with yourself. Okay. Now here's the other rub. Whenever we're out of integrity, it needs to be justified. And this is why people get into a victim mindset, back to our conversation earlier, because they have to justify the lack of integrity always. And watch yourself. Like I do it all the time. The alarm goes off 5:30. Let's say I was up late the night before. The alarm goes off at 5:30. I have a choice. I get out of bed, I go to the gym, or I skip my workout. Now, everyone that's listening, if you guys are honest with yourselves, there's an internal dialogue if you choose to not go to the gym. You say, no, I'm not going to go to the gym. And then the next thought is the excuse of why. I'm not going to go to the gym. because, I was up late last night and sleep's more important. I read a podcast about sleep being more important than working out. And so, I'm going to sleep in, or whatever it is, you need to justify it because it goes against the fabric of your being. You have to excuse it. Now, here's the rub. Reduced confidence, victim mindset. But here's the funny thing about a victim mindset. A victim typically always has a what? A persecutor, right? We will start creating persecutors in our life to justify our victimhood, or said another way, to justify our lack of integrity. Let me give you an example.
Yeah, please.
Parenting. See what I told you, parenting, perfect example. Little kids, baby, this is years ago, baby's, I don't know, 2 months old or whatever, 3 months old. Wife's a better sleeper than I am. 3 a.m. in the morning, baby's crying. Wakes me up. She's snoozing, dead asleep. I have a choice, yes? Get my ass out of the bed, go take care of the baby. Or I could do a little, shoulder nudge and like, hey, honey, the baby, Now, what my thought initially was, and this is where the self-betrayal comes in, the first initial thought was, I should, right? My heart, my gut, whatever my conscious, the Holy Spirit, whatever term you want to use, karma said, you should go get the baby, right? That's what was in my heart. Now, if I said, screw that, all right, I'm tired, and I come up with my excuse. Now, my excuse might be, oh man, I'm the one that has to get up at 5. She doesn't. She can get up with the baby right now and then go back to bed and sleep in later. I'm the one that is working so hard all the time. It's me that's doing this, and it's me that's doing that. And I create this story, this elaborate, dramatic story of woe is Kipp, and about how I'm underappreciated, and all this because I'm too lazy to get out of the bed. And how am I seeing my wife in that example? As a little bit of my persecutor. She should be the one to do it, not me. Right? If I get up, she's not the one benefiting me. And literally I am affecting my relationship with my wife, and all that she's doing is sitting over there sleeping. It's fascinating. And we will do this constantly, right? You don't like how your life looks. You're unhappy with how you turned out as an adult. Probably more than 70% of us blame our parents for it. They're our persecutor. Well, it's because I was raised. My parents, they never loved me. They didn't create opportunity, whatever it is. And your parent may not even know the webs of lies that you're spinning, and the destruction to their relationship with you that you're creating. Also, you can feel justified for your mediocre life. And it goes everywhere. Our jobs, our bosses. Whenever we want to practice self-betrayal and victimhood, we typically create a persecutor, and we undermine our relationship with that individual.
Like someone to blame?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Someone has to be blamed, because I'm not going to blame myself, right? I'm not going to take ownership of my own life. So whose fault is it? Oh, it's the government's. It's a political party. No, I'm serious, right? I mean, am I wrong here? It's the government. It's a political party. It's Trump. It's white people. It's black people. Those are all forms of victimhood. Now, here's the interesting part. We can also perpetuate and promote victimhood by being the rescuer or the hero for people as well. Hey, your life is tough, man. It's not your fault. It's not your fault, man. It's okay. It's because of where you're from. It's because of your skin color. No, I'm not joking. It's because all these other things. Don't take ownership of your life. No. Don't take ownership of your life. It's not your fault. It's someone else's fault. And we perpetuate a victimhood mindset, which has zero growth. You don't grow in the state of victimhood because your life is not within your realm of control. Your life is the way it is because your gods, your persecutors, and your heroes are pulling the strings, not you.
A really, yeah, really important topic. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, dude. It's crazy.
It's not a topic that is talked a lot about these days.
No. No. And this is part of some of the leadership stuff that I do is how do we as leaders ensure, because there's scales of victimhood, right? You don't think the majority of employees have a victim mindset? Oh, my job is this. I'm doing this work, not because I believe it. I'm doing this job because I'm doing these tasks because my boss told me to. That's victimhood. You're being acted upon. Woe is you. Your job sucks because of someone else. Most people relate to that. Most people do. And most people in a leadership position promote it subconsciously by how they micromanage employees. You promote victimhood when you micromanage people. Right? So we got to be very careful on the scale by which we generate this with environments. I hear it all the time. I went to a conference last weekend and I heard, oh, yeah, man, it's really tough to work for us. A lot of employees they're really victim mindset. Yeah, that's because you don't empower them. You don't let their actions be rooted in them being self-directed and fully committed and through agency of choice, right? A quote, it's actually not a quote, a saying I like to say that I just really love is an employee's actions should never be driven by requirement, but only by choice. Let me give you an example.
Yeah, please.
I do leadership training for all our leaders, not required. Why? Because there's a big difference between you coming to that training because you want to versus you coming to the training because it's required. You're wasting my time if you're coming to this training because it's required. You really are, because you're not fully committed and engaged. Period. And what I don't want is a compliant person in a training class bringing down the energy of what we're discussing. Now, here's the rub. Maybe that's really valuable. And I really think it's really valuable. And I want all the leaders to come to the training. I really do. Then it's up to me to share in a way that I can enlist them in the importance of coming so they can make that choice for themselves. Right? Ask how many employees, like in the US, right? We're silly. Depending on the state that you're in, you know, if you're in California, you have to do all this like diversity and inclusion training and all this compliant training because the government has like forced it down people's throats, right? Around this training that they have to do. You tell me how many employees are getting the value of that training because it's being forced upon them. Of course they're not. Yeah. They're checking the box. Now what are we doing? Oh, now we're doing things to check boxes, process for process sake, policy for policy's sake. That's not effective. That's not efficient, man. And we're just controlling the masses, right? Trying to, you know, dictate what they should or should not do and being lazy going, hey, if I can't convince you why you should do this leadership training, then maybe you shouldn't do it. Or maybe we shouldn't be doing it. If I can't convince the importance of it, maybe we shouldn't, right? Or maybe I'm the wrong person because I can't even communicate effectively why you should or should not be doing something. But we're going to use fear, tactics, and anxiety and other things to get people to do something. Man, right? And that's why there's a whole tangent, right? But this is why you see a backlash of like face masks, right? During COVID, especially in US for certain people. Why? Because you're going to force us? No. That's, and there's human nature, the human nature. We want to know what we're doing is because of us, right? There's a level of fulfillment that comes through agency and choice that is not available to you as a victim. And I think for me, it's like, I probably would have wore a mask more likely if someone gave me a decent argument. Hey, this is valuable. Here's the reason why. Hey, it's up to you, Kipp. It's your choice, but we recommend it. And here's the benefits. All right, check. But the minute you go, we're going to mandate it. Oh, no. Then it's like, I'm ripping the thing off and saying, F you. You're not going to tell me. You can communicate to me like an adult, and you can convince me and give me the pros and cons and let me choose. But you're not going to dictate things. Right. But then again, us Americans, we're a little bit like, we have a chip on our shoulder around being controlled, right? Based upon our ancestors. So
yeah, I think that maybe
we're a little sensitive about government control. Or you'd think
I guess that was the situation over here too. So yeah. And I mean, thank you for everything you shared around leadership and victimhood, and it's such an interesting topic. And I guess it will be very interesting for people to listen to. The whole conversation here, Kipp. And appreciate that you wanted to come and take some time to share with us.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, obviously, if it's not apparent, it's something I'm passionate about. And I think I don't think this isn't like Kippisms, right? These are foundational principles that are transcendent. And you will find the principles of victimhood and agency in almost every religion over history of time. And we spin them, and we communicate it differently, and we bring up different issues, but those principles are true principles. You know what I mean? If we just take the time to see how it affects how we're showing up in the world.
Yeah. Thank you for coming, and thank you for your time.
For sure. Yeah, it was great. Thanks for having me.